Good evening. You could be forgiven these days for thinking that crime is out of control, that the police are powerless. The truth is rather different. Using all the cunning and ingenuity at their command, the police do in fact solve most serious crime. This program shows you exactly how they do it. Most of us first became aware of tonight's story in the spring of 1989. At that time, the nation was reduced to near panic by what became known as consumer terrorism. Somebody, somewhere, was poisoning jars of baby food and blackmailing the companies who made them. This was costing the companies millions of pounds in lost revenue, and while the blackmailers were on the loose, no infant was safe. What follows is the story of exactly what happened during those frightening months. Actors have been used to recreate the investigation, but the script itself is taken from the actual police notes of the case. Tonight's story is called The Golden Rule. It begins with a policeman, a journalist, and a tape recorder.
Well, the thing about good crime is, it's a science.
I would have thought it was more a matter of chance.
No, it's not about chance, or even opportunity. It's about rules. It's a question of sticking to the rules.
Name some.
Well, don't get caught for a start.
Oh, yes, of course.
The journalist was an
That's
old
all
friend
very
of the
well,
policeman.
You can't write
Between
a
them,
book
they
on
were
anything
planning to
so
write a book
obvious.
drawing on his long experience in the force.
Perfect crime.
That night, the conversation turned to the age-old question of the perfect crime.
Well, come on. What do you mean exactly?
It's like a game with its own set of rules. If you follow the rules, you've got a chance of winning. And right at the top is the most important rule of all. I call it the golden rule.
What is it?
The 1980s has been the age of a new type of terrorist, the consumer terrorist. The targets are large companies, and the ransom money is usually dwarfed by the potential loss in profits from bad publicity about their products being poisoned or tampered with in some way. Fortunately, like other blackmails, there is still the problem of the pickup. Now, this is the weak point in any blackmailer's plan, because however carefully they plot everything else, they've still got to be at a specific place at a more or less specific time to get their money.
One student who seemed unusually interested in the words of his lecturer that summer was a 38-year-old detective sergeant from East London. His name was Rodney Whichelow.
This time, but I shall be returning to the subject at a later session. I'll be available for questions between 5 and 6 this afternoon. Otherwise,
After the course, Whichelow spent the next 2 years simply getting on with the job of being a competent, if slightly asthmatic, policeman.
Thank you, Margaret.
This is a demand of Pedigree Pet Foods to pay £100,000 to prevent its products being contaminated with toxic substances. The accompanying tin of Pedigree Chum dog food has had the contents mixed with dodecylamine salicylate and dodecylamine lactata, biocides. These chemicals were selected because they are colourless, odourless, and highly toxic. They're virtually undetectable by a pet owner before feeding the contaminated product to their dog. If payment is not forthcoming from Pedigree Pet Foods or Mars Limited, then large numbers of similarly contaminated tins will appear on retailers' shelves throughout Great Britain.
Sophie, come on. Come on. Yes, a good girl.
Don't she?
Eh? There you go.
Marjorie, could you get the police for me? Straight away.
Pretending he was a gang of blackmailers, Witchelow told Pedigree Pet Foods to acknowledge his letter by placing a coded message in the personal columns of the Daily Telegraph. Under the guidance of Leicestershire Police, the company had done what Witchelow asked. The police had added a phone number in an attempt to strike up a dialogue with the blackmailers. But they would learn that this was no ordinary blackmail. The first letter had started the ball rolling. Now Witchelow addressed himself to the problem of the pickup, the part of the plot that leads to the downfall of most blackmailers.
Telephone.
His solution was a stroke of genius.
Cash dispensers. It's very clever. They want the money paid into 3 accounts. Then they take it out bit by bit from any one of thousands of cash machines up and down the country.
All 3 accounts were sent to a postal address in Hammersmith. Opened 2 years ago. They're untraceable.
Well, whoever they are, they've done their homework. How much can they withdraw at one go?
300 a day.
It's very clever.
Witchelow had been a model policeman in his 13 years with the force. He finished up at Hackney CID after a spell in East London with the Regional Crime Squad, or RCS. Now he took an early retirement on the grounds of ill health through his asthma and was given a commendation for exemplary conduct.
How many years has it been?
13, sir.
Have you thought what you'll do now?
Oh, I've one or two thoughts, sir.
Witchelow had opened accounts with the Halifax, Abbey National and Nationwide. But Leicestershire Police only put the ransom money in the Halifax account, limiting him to 900 cash point machines. They hoped this number would further reduce if the withdrawals were made from one particular area. Then they might be able to mount a big enough surveillance operation to catch someone red-handed. But obsessed with committing the perfect crime, Witchelow wouldn't even give them that slim chance. With an elderly mother, his only close family, he hit the road, one day drawing money out in Wales, the next in Scotland, constantly keeping the police guessing.
Got some business down in Wales.
But the Leicestershire Police move to limit withdrawals to the Halifax account had infuriated Witchelow. He decided the time had come to show them he meant business. On December the 5th, 1988, after a series of hoax calls, Basildon police were told that some pedigree chum in a local supermarket had been poisoned. This time the alert was for real. Forensic scientists discovered several tins had been spiked with poisonous salicylic acid. Leicestershire Police asked Pedigree to keep the blackmail threats a strict secret. They felt the public weren't in danger because it was obvious which cans had been tampered with. But Witchelow was ahead of the game. He'd been to school. He knew the best way to get the company to pay up was to threaten them with a nightmare sales slump.
We are accordingly changing tactics. We're now going to implant razor blades into the tins. We're going to allow the voice of the great British public to announce to the media that your products are being interfered with.
Oh, sorry, after you.
Witchelow, however, was tiring of the Pedigree Pet Foods blackmail. In his mind, he was hatching a new, more terrifying twist to his plan. On March the 22nd, 1989, Witchelow sent a new threat to Heinz baby foods based in London. Again, he used the Romeo and Juliet code names, but now he switched his attention to a product for human consumption. He wanted £100,000 a year for 5 years. If not, he would contaminate their baby foods with caustic soda. The investigation, codenamed Operation Roach, was immediately transferred to Scotland Yard. There, an incident room was set up under Detective Chief Superintendent Pat Fleming.
So, it appears that there is a gang behind this. The same gang that has been blackmailing Pedigree Pet Foods. Now, having read all the reports, the only option open to us at the moment is surveillance. Gavin.
Now, the only way to do this is to have at least 3 men at each possible cash point machine. 1 man on the inside watching the computer, which will tell us when the blackmail account is being used, and then, of course, 2 other men on the outside in radio contact who can make the arrest.
As you know, there are 900 Halifax cash points that the blackmailer could use. So that means we're going to need something like 3,000 men for this job. And the advantage is that the blackmailers won't be expecting us to cover every cash point.
Teams kept watch on cash points up and down the country.
Nothing doing, false alarm.
For some reason, the blackmailer, or team of blackmailers as the police still thought they might be dealing with, made no withdrawals that night.
I was just saying, it was a complete rub-out, that blackmail surveillance, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were drafted in by the yards. We put 3 men on every cash point, and the bastard didn't show.
You're going to give it another go, though, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. There's another one planned next week.
Oh, well. Better luck next time, eh?
Fleming kept the pressure on, now setting up video surveillance. 2 days before Christmas, the Operation Roach team got what they hoped would be their first big breakthrough. A withdrawal had been made from the blackmail account at a cash point in Ipswich. By a stroke of luck, the branch was one of a handful Fleming had covered by the surveillance cameras.
It's whoever uses the cash point next. Here
There
it
he
is.
is. Guys, get helmet on.
It's nice, isn't it?
Come on, let's have a look at you.
Turn round. Maybe he's got that visor up.
Oh, no.
Damn. We're dealing with a very sharp bunch.
It was another big disappointment for the investigating team, and time was running out, fast. It was the chemical symbol for caustic soda. There was 5 times the amount needed to kill a baby in the jar, but the warning label had sunk to the bottom.
What the hell's in this stuff?
Luckily, the woman had bought the baby food to feed her puppy and had spooned the contents out first. It was a miracle no one had been seriously hurt. The team was still no closer to an arrest. Fleming had a private talk with his number 2, Detective Chief Inspector Gavin Robertson, and faced up to reality.
Oh, no one gets that lucky, Gavin. Christ, it's almost if he knows when our surveillance jobs are on. Now look, I trust every last man in that team with my life. Either they've got a guardian angel...
Or we've got a leak.
Exactly.
The surveillance still wasn't working, and by now Wichlow had withdrawn a total of £14,000. To get round the £300 a day limit, he would sometimes visit a machine just before midnight, withdraw one lot of money, then wait until just after midnight before withdrawing another £300. The team decided to program the computer to swallow the card the next time he used it. Maybe they could lift a fingerprint off it. But Wichlow was too clever for that. He always wore gloves. His response to losing the card was chilling.
We are the commercial terrorists that have been contaminating your products. We're about to return with a vengeance. Next time, it will be potassium cyanide in your jars. Other Heinz products in tins will also be contaminated. If we're prosecuted for murder, we might as well deserve it. But we're confident we'll never be caught. An infant's death will be another statistic as far as we're concerned.
Faced with the possible death of a member of the public, Fleming decided the time had finally come to go public.
Morning. My name is Chief Superintendent Fleming, that's with one M, from the Regional Crime Squad. On March the 22nd this year, Heinz Baby Foods received a blackmail threat. A letter...
The result was astonishing. Fleming's team were buried under a tidal wave of over 2,000 copycat false alarms in just 1 month. The publicity had spawned a monster. Heinz, who were facing a massive slump in sales, offered a £100,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the blackmailers. It seemed to have the desired effect. Soon afterwards, a letter was sent to Heinz offering inside information on the blackmail gang in exchange for the reward.
Want to see me, Gov?
Yes, close the door, Kevin. You seen this?
Yes.
Oh, there's no doubt that he's penetrating us somewhere. He says in here that he knows we've been watching the cash point machines.
But there's also no doubt he knows the blackmailers. He knows Romeo and Juliet.
Well, I'm coming to that. Look, this letter was stenciled. The others were typed. And this one appears as if it's been written by a dimwit. But look at the method of payment. Through building society accounts that once again we've been unable to trace.
So what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that this person knows too much. I think we're not dealing with an informant. We're dealing with a blackmailer. Look, the only people I want to know about this letter are you and me. At the moment, the blackmailer thinks he knows what we're up to. Well, if I'm right, from now on, that needn't be a disadvantage.
He'd guessed right. With no card, Witchelow's supply of cash had completely dried up, so he tried a last throw of the dice. Using 2 new accounts in the name of Ian and Nina Fox, he'd pretended to be an informant and was attempting to get his hands on the £100,000 reward money. Now, at last, it was Witchelow's turn to be outwitted. Fleming and Robertson's next move was to give the rest of the team the impression that the investigation was winding down.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. Any day now, I expect to be moved on to something else.
Well, the word is that even the boss has given up on this one. And I haven't seen Robertson about this week either.
In reality, a new and top-secret operation had been started, codenamed Agincourt. 2 officers were transferred from the regular team. One had been told to tell his colleagues he was on sick leave, and a bit later the other pretended he needed time off for compassionate reasons. Fleming also put some of the reward money in the Ian and Nina Fox accounts.
It's working.
He's starting to get lazy, sir. He's not travelling all over the country anymore. Most of the withdrawals now seem to be in the London area, slightly favouring the east.
Well, it's time to mount another surveillance operation. Only this time, we'll stick to London.
The 2 accounts open in the name of Ian and Nina Fox. He seems to be favouring the one with the Woolwich, sir.
OK, let's concentrate on the Woolwich. We'll choose 15 Woolwich cash points on a best guess basis and stake them out.
Fleming drafted in special branch men to mount the surveillance, maintaining the secrecy of the operation.
Sophie! Come on.
The surveillance operation was set for October the 20th and 21st. But just before the units got in position, disaster seemed to have struck. a workman accidentally cut through a cable servicing the Woolwich mainframe computer. Now the police wouldn't know when the blackmail account was being used. However, as the operation was already set up, Fleming decided to go ahead with it. Meanwhile, Witcherlow had tried a machine in Uxbridge, which wasn't being watched. By pure chance, it was one put out of order by the workman. Hungry for another £300, Witcherlow kept on the move.
Here's a motor.
That's a description. Crash helmet.
Yes.
It's burning.
Keep your hands free and don't make any sudden moves. Get out of the car. You fit the description of a man we're hunting in connection with a serious crime. And I want to search you.
Okay, guys, no problems, eh?
What's the crash helmet for?
Stops me getting wet.
Ian and Nina Fox. Now, those names are very familiar to me. And you know why, don't you?
Don't know what you're talking about.
I'm arresting you in connection with offences of blackmail and threats to kill. You don't have to say anything, but anything you do say may be taken down and given in evidence.
It should have been a triumphant moment for Fleming, but his joy was tempered by the stunning news that the blackmailer was a lone ex-policeman. The plan had got Witcherlow £34,000, but he'd often phoned his mother and friends on his mobile phone during his travels. And when those times and locations were cross-checked with cash point withdrawals, they tallied perfectly. If the workman hadn't cut the cable, the team would have missed Witcherlow again. But it wasn't only chance that caught him. In the end, he'd been caught mainly because he'd broken the golden rule.
What is it? Greed. You mustn't get greedy.
Greed is the downfall of them all.
Breaking his own rule cost Rodney Witcherlow dear. On the 17th of December 1990, an Old Bailey jury found him guilty of 6 counts of blackmail, plus 2 each of contaminating food products and attempting to obtain property by deception. He was also found guilty of 1 charge of making a threat to kill. He was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment. Good evening.